The moment Anna Blake whispered those 7 quiet words, Luke Tanner felt his whole world tilt. "I've been aching down there." She said it with her hands clenched, her voice shaking, her gray eyes filled with a pain she had been hiding far too long. And in that single moment, the fastest gambler in New Mexico realized he was no longer dealing with cards. He was dealing with a woman's truth. A truth he never expected to hear from the mail-order bride he'd been tricked into marrying. The desert wind pushed dust across Cottonwood Lane as Luke Tanner stood frozen in the doorway of the small adobe house that was now their home. He had married Anna only days ago, all because of a reckless bet he'd made inside the Dusty Spur Saloon, a bet he lost with the worst hand of his life. A bet that forced him to take a wife he'd never seen, never spoken to, never chosen. But nothing, not the bet, not the humiliation, not the wedding forced in front of the entire town, stunned him the way Anna's trembling confession did now. Anna stood perfectly still beside the kitchen table, her shoulders tight, her breath unsteady. The lamplight flickered across her pale face. She wasn't scared of him. That was the part that hit him hardest. She was scared of being ignored again. "Anna," Luke said quietly, stepping toward her, "what do you mean? Are you hurt?" Her voice came out in a whisper so soft he had to lean in to hear it. "It aches, because I've been working too hard at Papa's store for years. Lifting crates, standing all day, never resting. I never told anyone. Not Papa, not the doctor, nobody. They all think I'm fine." Luke's stomach twisted. She wasn't confessing something shameful. She was confessing how invisible she'd been her whole life. And suddenly Luke had no idea what to do with the heat that climbed up his throat. She wasn't the quiet burden he'd feared. She was a woman carrying too much pain and too many secrets, and now she was trusting him with one. The same woman he'd once thought was a punishment. "I didn't marry you to make trouble," Anna said, her fingers twisting together. "I just didn't want you thinking something was wrong with me when I moved slow or wince. I didn't want to be a disappointment." Luke's chest squeezed. A disappointment. That was what this whole town had made her believe she was. Before he could answer, lightning flashed outside, bright and violent. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the desert, shaking the windows. A storm was coming. Anna looked toward the window, her composure slipping. "Storm season came early," she whispered. "Papa always said these winds tear off roofs like they're made of paper." Luke stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't explain. "Anna," he said softly, "you're not a disappointment, and you're not something that happened to me. I promise you that." She blinked up at him, startled. Before either of them could say more, the wind slammed against the house so hard the lamps trembled. The walls groaned, and a sharp crack sounded from somewhere above. "The roof!" Anna gasped. "Luke!" Another crash shook the house. A section of the tile slid off, and rain poured in through the gap like a broken bucket spilling over. Without thinking, Luke grabbed her hand. "Come on." Together they rushed through the dimly lit room, grabbing pots and buckets, placing them under the leaks that multiplied faster than they could move. Water splashed everywhere, soaking the floor, their clothes, their hair. The wind roared, whistling through every crack like the house was screaming. "You stay back!" Luke shouted as he ran out into the storm to save what he could of the roof. The rain hit him like needles. The ladder shook under his weight. The wind nearly swept him off the tiles. But he didn't stop. Not when the roof belonged to the woman who had whispered pain into a world that had never listened to her. Inside, Anna worked just as frantically, emptying and refilling buckets, pushing water out the door with her bare hands. By the time Luke crashed back inside, soaked to the bone, shaking from the cold, the kitchen was ankle-deep in water. Anna turned toward him, fear bright in her gray eyes. "Is it bad?" she whispered. "It's worse than bad," Luke admitted, breathing hard. "But we'll make it through." Lightning lit the room again, and for a moment Luke saw the truth he had missed all this time. Anna was trembling not just from fear of the storm. She was trembling because she wasn't used to having someone fight for her. "Come to the back room," Luke said, guiding her away from falling debris as another section of the ceiling groaned above them. It's safer there. They squeezed into the small room, the only place untouched by the storm. The walls shook, but it was dry, barely. Anna held a small wooden box to her chest, her breaths coming fast. "What's that?" Luke asked. "My mother's things," she whispered. "It's all I have left of her." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm screamed and tore at the house like something alive. Luke finally sank down beside her, the rainwater dripping from his hair. "You grabbed the most important thing you own," he said softly. "That matters." Anna looked down at the box, then up at him. "What would you save, Luke?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, and for the first time in his life, he realized he had nothing precious enough to save. "That must be lonely," Anna said quietly, her voice trembling. The storm raged on. And in that tiny room, shoulder to shoulder, soaked and shaken and surrounded by thunder, something shifted between them. Not love. Not yet. But the beginning of it. When morning came, the storm was gone, but its destruction was everywhere. Half the roof had caved in. The main room was soaked through. Tables were overturned, chairs broken, supplies ruined. The floor squished under Luke's boots with every step. Anna stood in the middle of the wreckage, her hair still damp, her nightdress torn from the night's chaos. She looked around the ruined home with a steady calm Luke didn't understand. Most people would have cried. She simply said, "We'll fix it." "No," Luke corrected gently, "we'll fix it together." And they did. They spent the morning clearing debris, dragging broken furniture outside, saving what little remained. Neighbors soon arrived, offering help without being asked. Even Jacob Blake, Anna's father, showed up, his face pale until he saw his daughter unharmed. "You all right?" he asked, grabbing Anna's shoulders, his voice thick. "I'm fine, Papa," she said softly. "Luke was here the whole time." Jacob's eyes moved to Luke. Something unspoken passed between the two men. Something that felt like trust. By afternoon, tarps were nailed over the open roof, and the worst of the damage was contained. The house looked battered, but not defeated. Just like the two people living in it. As the neighbors left, Luke noticed something different in the way they looked at Anna. Respect. Real respect. She'd braved a storm without panic, worked all night to save her home, and stood beside Luke like an equal. It made Luke's chest feel strange, proud, protective. Maybe something more. That evening, after hours of cleaning, Anna was sorting salvaged linens when Luke approached her. "You never panicked," he said quietly. "Not once." Anna looked at him, her tired eyes soft. "You came back," she answered. "You didn't leave me alone in that storm." Luke blinked. "Of course I came back." "That's not obvious to everybody," Anna whispered. The words hit him harder than any punch. She had been left alone too many times in her life, overlooked, forgotten, ignored. No wonder she clung to a wooden box of memories. No wonder she thought she wasn't worth protecting. "Anna," Luke said softly, "I'm not leaving you, not in a storm." "Not ever." She held his gaze a long moment, something fragile sparking behind her eyes. Then she nodded and went back to folding linen, but her hands trembled slightly. The next days passed in a strange rhythm, quiet, steady, full of small surprises. Luke repaired the damaged fence. Anna scrubbed mud from the floors. They talked more than before, not much, but enough to warm the space between them. One evening she watched him cook beans on the stove, her chin resting in her hand. "You're improving," she said. "Only burned one pot today," Luke joked. She actually laughed. A soft, bright laugh. Luke froze, the spoon in his hand forgotten. He'd never heard her laugh before. It made something in his chest twist in a good way. Later, she sat across from him at the small table, mending a shirt. A strand of hair slid loose from her bun, brushing her cheek. Luke watched her for a moment, suddenly aware of everything he didn't know about her. "Anna," he said quietly, "why did you agree to marry me?" She stitched another thread before answering. Because I was tired of being invisible. Luke's jaw tightened. You're not invisible to me. Anna looked up, startled. He didn't look away. And for the first time, she blushed. Their fragile peace didn't last. 3 days later, trouble arrived on horseback. Luke and Anna were outside, repairing a corner of the barn, when they saw 3 riders coming fast from the east. Dust trailed behind them like smoke. Luke's stomach dropped. Red Jack. One of the meanest drifters in New Mexico, and a man who'd never forgotten a grudge. Get behind me, Luke murmured. But Anna didn't move. She stayed exactly where she was, her face pale but determined. The riders halted 20 feet away. Red Jack leaned forward in his saddle, sneering. Heard you and your quiet wife think you're better than the rest of us, he called. Heard she hit a target at the range. Bet she can't hit much else. Anna's hand tightened around the rifle she'd been holding earlier. Luke stepped forward. You've got one chance to leave. Red Jack laughed. You talk tough, Tanner, but I think your wife needs a reminder of her place. He reached for his gun. The crack of Anna's rifle split the air before Luke even breathed. A puff of dirt exploded inches from Red Jack's horse, making the animal rear. His 2 companions fumbled for their guns. Anna fired again. This bullet tore the hat clean off one man's head. Luke stared at her. Steady hands. Steady breath. Steady heart. She didn't look afraid at all. Her voice rang out, stronger than Luke had ever heard it. The next shot is not a warning. Leave now. Red Jack's smirk faltered. His eyes darted to Luke, to Anna, then back again. This ain't over, he snapped. Yes, it is, Anna said. Ride! And he rode. They all did. When the dust settled, Anna's hands began shaking. Luke was beside her in an instant. Anna, I wasn't sure I could do it, she whispered, voice trembling, but I couldn't let them hurt you. Luke felt something break open inside him. Hey, he whispered, pulling her gently into his arms. She didn't resist. She leaned into him like she'd been waiting for someone to hold her for years. You were brave, he murmured, braver than me. She shook her head against his chest. I was terrified. But you stood with me, Luke said. You didn't run. He touched her cheek, turning her face toward him. Her gray eyes shone with fear and something else. Something fragile. Something hopeful. Anna, he whispered, you're not alone anymore. Her breath hitched. She stared up at him. And slowly, carefully, she lifted her face. When their lips met, it was nothing like the brief wedding kiss. This one was warm, real, full of everything they had survived together. When they pulled apart, Anna whispered the truth that changed everything. I've been aching because nobody ever cared enough to ask what hurt. Luke cupped her face gently. I care, he whispered, more than I should, more than I expected, more than I can hide. Her eyes filled, but her voice was steady. Then don't hide. The days after the gunfight changed everything. Luke and Anna no longer moved like strangers sharing a roof. They cooked together, ate together, talked late into the night. And when Anna smiled at him, Luke felt something warm and terrifying settle deep in his chest. A feeling he'd spent his whole life running from. But not anymore. One cool morning, before the sun had finished rising over Cottonwood Lane, Luke walked into the kitchen to find Anna sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm water. Her face was pale, her breath unsteady. Anna? Luke stepped toward her. Are you hurt? She lifted her eyes to him. No, just feeling strange these past days. Tired, dizzy, sick in the mornings. Luke froze. Her meaning hit him slowly, then all at once. Anna, he whispered, are you? I think I might be, she said softly, pregnant. For a heartbeat, Luke didn't breathe. A baby. Their baby. His whole life, all the drifting, all the gambling, all the running, had never prepared him for the idea of holding something small and warm and alive that belonged to him and the woman he was beginning to love. "How do you feel about it?" Luke asked quietly. Anna swallowed hard, scared and happy and lost, all at once. Luke reached out and took her hands in his. "We'll figure it out together," he said, "no matter what." She looked at him, her gray eyes full of a fragile hope she no longer tried to hide. Later that day, they visited Dr. Harrison in town, who confirmed the news with a gentle smile. "Congratulations," he said. "Mrs. Tanner is healthy. The baby is strong. You can expect your child in early spring." "Child!" The word echoed in Luke's chest like thunder. He walked Anna home with his hand around hers the whole way, and that evening, lying beside her, he whispered, "You're not invisible anymore, and neither is our future." Anna's tears fell softly onto his shirt, but she smiled through everyone. Winter arrived, cold and dry, settling over their land like a blanket of quiet snow. The little adobe house grew warmer each day, as Luke repaired walls, rebuilt the porch, and hammered new boards into the roof. With Anna watching from a rocking chair her father gifted her for the baby. They fell into a life that surprised them both. Anna began humming when she cooked. Luke began whistling when he worked. And every night, they slept tangled together beneath the soft quilts Anna once mended alone. The whispers in town changed too. People no longer called Anna the quiet girl. They called her Mrs. Tanner, the woman who stood down outlaws and survived storms with her husband at her side. They called Luke something new as well, a husband, a father-to-be, a man who'd finally stopped running. But the past wasn't finished with them. Not yet. It was late one cold afternoon, Anna resting near the fire, when the distant thunder of hooves snapped Luke to alertness. 3 riders approached from the ridge. Red Jack and his men. Again. Luke reached for his rifle. Anna rose slowly, cradling her small belly with one hand. "You stay behind me," Luke warned. Anna shook her head. "No, we stand together." Red Jack reined in, his face twisted with anger. "You think you humiliated us last time?" he snarled. "We're finishing this today." Luke stepped forward, voice steady. "No one's finishing anything. Leave." Jack sneered. "Not without a fight." He drew his gun. Anna raised hers faster. Her voice was steady, colder than the winter air. "You come one step closer," she said, "and you'll never ride again." But Red Jack wasn't aiming at Luke. He wasn't aiming at Anna. He was aiming at the small, round swell beneath her hands. Luke saw it in an instant, the shift in Jack's eyes, the angle of his wrist, and he acted before thought could form. He pushed Anna behind him and fired. The crack split through the frozen air. Red Jack's horse reared. Jack fell backward into the dust, his gun flying from his hand. His wounded men scrambled, fear overtaking their anger. Within seconds they fled, racing across the ridge without looking back. Luke lowered his rifle, chest heaving. Anna stood there, trembling, her hands pressed protectively to her stomach. "You saved us," she whispered. "No," Luke said, pulling her into his arms, his voice shaking. "We saved each other." She sank into his chest, clutching his coat, her tears soaking the fabric. The fear of losing each other, of losing the tiny life they'd created, hit them both like a blow. "I won't let anything happen to you or our baby," Luke murmured into her hair. "I know," Anna whispered, "because you stayed. When the storm came, when danger came, when everyone expected you to run, you stayed." He held her tighter. "For you," he said softly. "For us." Spring arrived gently, filling the desert with wildflowers and soft winds. The roof was fixed, the fences rebuilt, and the house transformed into something warm and new. A home. Anna's belly grew round and full. Luke's hands grew calloused from work he'd never imagined himself doing. And they grew closer than either had planned the day they were forced to marry. One warm night, as Anna rested on the porch, the silver bird necklace Luke had gifted her catching the last orange light of sunset, she looked at him with a small, emotional smile. "Luke, do you ever think about what that card game gave us?" she asked. Luke sat beside her, placing his hand gently over the baby moving beneath her dress. "Every day. And do you ever think it was meant to be? You losing that hand, me saying yes?" Luke leaned his forehead against hers, the desert wind cool around them. "I think," he whispered, "that losing that game was the first time in my life I ever truly won anything." Anna's eyes shone. "You won me," she said softly. "And our child," Luke added, "and a future I never thought I deserved." She smiled through the tears that filled her eyes. "Luke, I'm not aching anymore." He kissed her knuckles gently. "I know," he whispered, "because now you don't have to hurt alone." As the stars rose over Cottonwood Lane, Luke Tanner wrapped an arm around his wife, feeling her lean into him, her breath steady and full of peace. A gambler with nothing had become a husband with everything. And the quiet girl nobody saw had become the beating heart of the strongest family in New Mexico. Together they had survived storms, gunmen, fear, and the loneliness they both carried for years. Together they had built a home. Together they had chosen each other. The desert wind moved softly through the cottonwood trees as Luke whispered the truth he now knew deep in his bones. "Anna, the greatest gamble of my life was losing that card game. Because it gave me you." And Anna kissed him softly in the starlight.